Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome and thank you everyone for joining our exciting Data Foundations webinar this morning with ServiceNow product management team. I'm your host, Komal Saini, go-to-market lead, along with Jamie Tucker, Varun Mittal, and Callan Bond from the product management team. We welcome you and really appreciate the time that you are spending today with us. And we hope you get the full value from the 90 minutes we have dedicated to this session. This presentation includes forward-looking statements based on current assumptions and information. Any references to future products, features, or functionality reflect general direction only and should not be relied upon for making any purchasing decisions, as they are not commitments and may change at our discretion. So let's begin. Some of the housekeeping items here, we would love a full engagement from you and would appreciate that if you can save your time for Q&As at the end of the session. But feel free to use the Q&A feature. If you have any question, we will try our best during the session to answer those questions through the presentation. The presentation will be recorded and the material will be distributed after the session. There will be a survey towards the end. We also have a couple of poll questions embedded within the session as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jamie, Varun, and Kellen to get started.
Thank you, Komal. So yes, I'm going to start with the Data Foundations Mainline certification, and then we'll turn it over. You'll see some slideware, but also some really exciting demos. And as Komal said, put your questions in the Q&A, please. So we, in July, introduced a Data Foundations, which is CMDB and CSDM training and Mainline certification. This is the first time this has ever been offered. We've got a quote from Pablo Stern, our SVP and GM of Technology Workflows. Over time, we've been able to establish trust by understanding the company's target outcomes and mapping out how we can achieve them together. We did this by giving guidance on how to get the outcomes and by providing assistance in areas where their scale stretched the system. So what you're going to see today in this mainline is how we introduce these three pillars of our data foundation. So the reason that we realized there was a need for this, and this took about a year, this effort, and we had about 40 plus SMEs, including customers and partners, as well as ServiceNow subject matter experts, develop this exam. But the reason we did it is we started noticing a lot of decreasing return on investment across different customer environments. So customers would say, well, our CMDB implementation was great, but then we would look at some of their health metrics and we realize, well, it's not so great. They might have staleness. They might have a lot of duplicate CIs. So really, when you look at customer satisfaction or CSAT scores, they really just look at that implementation and say, oh, great, they got the CMDB implemented. We're now using ServiceNow. Everything's great. But they don't realize that there's a lot more to it than that in terms of how do you actually have good health in your data foundation that will make you AI ready. So what we've seen over 9,000 plus production instances is that there's quite a bit of technical debt. That can mean custom tables, ingestion processes that are just not bringing in the right data or too much data. And really the big one that Mark Bodman and I talk about quite a bit from the Data Foundations team is there's not a lot of governance and people don't really understand how to implement that. So the three pillars that I'm referencing are the data ingestion, governance, and insight. So we might actually see our customers doing well with one or two of these pillars. But if they don't have all three, they're not going to do well. They're not going to be a trusted data foundation, and you're going to have a lot of issues. One example we see a lot is that customers will implement discovery. They'll turn everything on. So they didn't identify their principal classes. They didn't figure out what was really relevant for their specific targeted outcomes because they didn't define those outcomes and they didn't have any governance. Um, so these are all things that you really need to employ to really show value in your data foundation. The other thing that we've noticed, and we were talking about this earlier internally, is that it's important to stay as current as you can on the platform. We have features that are constantly maturing, evolving. We also deprecate some features. So you don't want to be on N-3, N-4 necessarily. So the more customization you have, obviously, the harder it is to stay current and realize what's no longer available and what is now available. And a lot of the things that Data Foundations introduces in terms of features are often free or they really have a tremendous ROI and they're worth it. And we're going to go into a few of those. So the governance aspect of all of this, and this is the underlying thing, this is part of configuration management. It's really designed to help you monitor your progress so you can remediate issues that you've uncovered, as well as move forward with your stakeholders. So this is our new mainline certification, and you can see on the right. So what we have maintained from the past is the two micro certifications. One is Configure the CMDB, the other is CMDB Health. But now those roll up into this mainline certification. And when you have all three of these, you actually achieve a suite certification. So if you want to think about what's in it for me and for your organization specifically, when you have a really strong data foundation, that is your gold standard. So you want implementers to come in, know how to successfully design, implement, operationalize the CMDB as well as the CSDM framework, which is really moving toward an industry standard. And we, of course, have different levels of maturity to get you to the highest level possible, but you start where you are. It also leverages the three pillars I keep mentioning, which are ingest, govern, and insight. So when you have this mainline certification, it gives you credibility as a partner and it gives you a lot of trust by your customers because they know you've gone through all of the training, you've gone through the microcerts, the labs, and you've taken the exam, which I will say is not completely easy, but people do pass once they've taken all the training. We're going to go through what training is required to get through this mainline certification process. But it really gives a lot of insight into not just the CMDB fundamentals, but your CSDM fundamentals, things like service graph connectors, service mapping. It touches on all of these aspects of a solid data foundation. You don't have to use every single feature, and it goes into that during the training, but you'll want to choose the right things, the right methods of ingestion that get you to what you need for your organization to achieve value. If you are an employee, you have this mainline certification, and let's say you're looking for another job, it's really one of those standout features that allows employers to see, wow, this is the only person I've interviewed that has a mainline certification in data foundations. Very few people have that right now. So it's a trusted aspect of a skill set. And then if you're a partner and you achieve this, you will be featured on our ServiceNow Partner Finder to figure out which implementers have gone through this process, really understand how to implement these three pillars properly. So these are just a little bit more details. This is a little bit more detail about these three pillars. So in the ingest pillar, it really talks about how are you bringing in that data and are you using automation? If you have multiple sources of data, how are you picking and choosing the right field level attributes to go into your CMDB? You're connecting discoverable and non-discoverable logical and physical CIs, and you're ensuring that overall you have this managed ownership. And the white boxes are some of the features that we have to really help you implement these different aspects of the pillars. Under governance, This is a big one. As I've said, a lot of people skip over this and they don't realize how important it is. But you really need to establish your governance team, the roles, and have everybody aligned to that. It doesn't mean that everybody is a straight line connection to your CMDB or your configuration management system, your world, but you have a lot of dotted line relationships to different stakeholders, and it's extremely important to have that and to have the support. Governance will also make sure that you have improved health metrics. We talked about um, some of those outcomes that other people see, your completeness, your currency, do you have orphan relationships? So things like that, all of those metrics, and we actually look at about 40 of those across the ServiceNow environment internally. And you'll see one set of those in the dashboards that Callan is going to introduce. Um, and do you have life cycle processes? A lot of people don't think about that. So once you bring something into your data foundation, what is the process to get it out? So if it's no longer an operationalized CI, what is the importance of having it there other than it's really causing performance issues? It could even cause duplicate CI. So you have to have a life cycle management process, and we're introducing a lot of ways to do that. Managing and communicating structure definitions. Do people know what goes where, who owns what? And then, of course, supporting using and customizing and extending tables. And most importantly, and we'll talk about this, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions about this. We're not covering the topic today, but a lot of people are very interested in the Common Service Data Model, or CSDM. So a really important part of your data foundation is aligning to that data model. And again, there are different levels of maturity. So you kind of start where you are, and then you can go up that curve as you need to. And then the insight pillar is really about establishing analysis guidance, and you give operational support for all of the ITSM processes, reporting, metrics, decision making. All of these insights really depend on getting your data foundation right. So there's obviously different roles and personas that use different aspects of these insights, but you really want to have a good understanding of what insight is needed to move things forward and to align with your plan. Oops. So this is the learning path. There are a couple of prerequisites before you go into your mainline certification process, but you would need to really understand the basics of ServiceNow, the welcome, the admin fundamentals, platform implementation, getting started with Now Create. And then from there, you can use a variety of product lines. The mainline certification for partners for data foundations is specifically tied to the ITOM, ITAM, ITSM, and SecOps product lines. So if you want to be to have a product line achievement in those 4 areas, you would also need the Data Foundations mainline certification. So if you're a partner, I just wanted to mention that. And you have until the end of 2026 to do that. So there's plenty of time to get into that. But for everybody on the call, obviously, go ahead and take a look at the CMDB fundamentals training. It's free if you do it on demand. If you do the instructor led, of course, there's a cost to it. I like the on demand because you can do it when you have time. It's about 18 hours of content, but it's a really important course, and we've updated a lot of it. You'll do the micro certifications in the CMDB assessment simulators that we talked about earlier that lead up to that suite certification. The CMDB Health can configure the CMDB. And then another one that we've updated is the CSDM, or Common Service Data Model Fundamentals. So as you are hopefully aware, at Knowledge 25, we released the CSDM 5 white paper. And so along with that, we updated the CSDM fundamentals training. Again, you can take that on demand. There's no cost. So all of these things tie into, and you'll get a voucher for taking the exam, the Mainline certification exam for Data Foundations. As of today, we have several hundred people that have already passed, and our goal is to have probably 30,000 people by the end of next year, and I think it's very achievable. But again, you'll have to go back, and even if you've taken CMDB fundamentals already, go back and take that again. You can go ahead and scan this QR code if you want. It should take you to the ServiceNow University path for this Data Foundations Mainline certification process. There are other courses that we do recommend along the way, given enough time, and those are in the top right corner, but Agent Client Collector, Essentials ACC, Service Mapping, all kinds of things that really help you round out your entire knowledge base with regard to a good data foundation. The last thing I'll mention on this slide is that once you do achieve this mainline certification, which will be rolled up into the suite certification because you'll do the 2 micro-cert exams, which are labs, every year you have to recertify, and that's part of keeping this credible. To recertify, we do provide you with some Delta content, so you'll be able to stay current, and it's really important that you do that. As I mentioned earlier, not only do we have new features, but we have features that get deprecated along the way. So you'll get all of this in the deck that we provide after the meeting. And these are all just links. We have the exam blueprint, the credential path, and then you'll have to set up a web assessor account to go ahead and do your mainline certification testing. It is proctored. You can do it at your home, but someone will be watching you. You can do it at a testing center. It is a true mainline certification exam. It's a legally defensible exam. So now I'm going to turn it over to Varun, who's one of our product managers, and he's going to talk to you about CMDB Success Advisor.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining this session. My name is Varun. I'm the product manager and part of CMDB team. I'm pretty excited to talk about CMDB Success Advisor, a brand new feature that we added in CMDB Workspace as part of Zurich release. In this session, I will give you a brief intro about the product, followed by a demo. Healthy CMDB is foundation to successful IT operations that are powered by various ServiceNow applications such as hardware asset management for asset lifecycle control, ITSM for incident response management. CMDB Success Advisor drives the business outcomes of these applications such as HAM by helping CMDB admin improve targeted CMDB health rather than boiling the whole ocean in CMDB. CMDB Success Advisor truly unlocks the full potential of CMDB for IT excellence by building trust in CMDB data, resulting in improved adoption of these applications at your organization. Traditionally, we use 2 approaches for CSDM and CMDB implementations. One is stepwise approach, where in CMDB Data Foundations, you apply a stage as per the maturity. For example, foundation, crawl, walk, or run. Or in a CSDM domain-centric approach, you tackle one or more areas of the CSDM model. For example, it can be strategy and ideation and/or design and building. And with CMDB Success Advisor, we have come out with a new approach, which is outcome-centric approach, where you target an outcome such as asset lifecycle control, where IT asset manager wants to focus on certain model categories or the assets of his interest. And CMDB admin can actually support IT asset manager to achieve his outcomes by improving only the targeted CMDB data health. Key personas for CMDB Success Advisor are IT Asset Manager and CMDB Admin. Here I'm talking about CMDB Success Advisor for HAM because that's what we have released for Zurich. And in future, we will be working for more use cases like software asset management, IT asset management, and so on. So for HAM, we have Corey, who's the IT Asset Manager. He may lack visibility in asset and lifecycle data, and due to which he may not be able to make business decisions when it comes to managing asset lifecycle. For example, whether he needs to extend a warranty for the assets or when he needs to dispose the assets, which can lead to various financial, operational, security risks. And there are various indicators in ham workspace which would imply low quality of asset data. For example, if there is low normalization rate, or Corey sees that asset state is not matching with the CI install status or lifecycle status, or there can be assets which are missing CIs or vice versa. And there can be various underlying reasons on CMDB side. For example, sync settings are broken, or the configurations are not configured which are required to capture certain targeted data. And Maria, who is on CMDB side, she's not able to improve CMDB in a way that it moves needle for Corey, because Maria is not a ham expert. She doesn't know what configurations, rules, settings that she should look for, and what's her desired state, which can make or break ham implementations. She's unaware about the relevant integrations that she should configure to capture the targeted asset CI data, the CI hardware CI data for the corresponding assets. Also, when it comes to evaluating the health of hardware CIs, she doesn't know where to start, because in CMDB it's a volume of CIs, but to support Corey, she has to focus on only certain hardware classes for what Corey cares about. And when it comes to analyzing metrics, Jamie talked about 40 plus metrics, but in order to analyze hardware CI data, what are the key metrics that she should focus on? So this is where CMDB Success Advisor comes into play, and this is how the journey looks like, irrespective of the outcome that you want to achieve. As I said, we are targeting ham outcomes in Zurich. It's already there in the store. So how you start is that Maria can actually set scope for ham outcomes where she's on the same page with Corey, and Corey has said that for this year I want to go for server assets and, let's say, handheld devices. So what Maria would do is she will only select the corresponding classes or the model categories, and she will consistently track that data. And she will start by hydrating CMDB data with the targeted data sources by using recommended SDCs and discovery patterns for servers and handheld devices, let's say. And then she can apply best practices as it is guided in the CMDB Success Advisor. She can get to know what rules, settings, configurations are important from ham standpoint, get to know the current state of those settings, and she can get to the desired state. And lastly, she can actually analyze the whole hardware CI data health using ham tailored CMDB metrics that we have put across. And then she can work on those anomalies that she would see on the dashboard. She can look for root causes for those problems and try to remediate those data issues. So we have a poll question. If Komal, if you can just populate that poll. Okay, I guess you can see that poll.
Okay, right now we have about 50% participation. We'll go another 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. We've got about almost 70% participation. So let me go ahead and end the poll. And then I'm going to share the results. Unfortunately, I launched poll 2 instead of poll 1. My apologies.
Okay. Do you want to even launch poll 1 now?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to launch another poll for everybody. Hang on. And again, if you want to reach out to Varun, it's varun.mittal1@servicenow.com. Okay, we're at 50% participation. If you guys can go ahead and answer the poll question about the use cases.
So it will help us prioritize these use cases for advisor.
We're almost at 70%, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll in 5 seconds. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see the results here.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Cool, thank you. So I will move ahead then. So now let's jump onto the demo. There is also a YouTube video available on CMDB Success Advisor. You can have a look at it. But for now, let me jump to the live demo of the product. Yeah. So I'm in CMDB Workspace. If you have installed CMDB Success Advisor, you will start seeing CMDB Success Advisor card here on the right panel in the home page to get started. But you can dismiss this if you don't want to see it. And there is other entry point that you can go to the management. And here under Optimize, you can click CMDB Success Advisor. And it's a landing page of CMDB Success Advisor. For now, you see hardware asset management. As we go for more use cases, you will start seeing those tiles. Here, the approach remains the same. As I mentioned, the user journey, where you start by setting up the dashboard. That means you set up a scope, then you address, you follow the best practices, and then you address data discrepancies, and then you improve health by remediating all those anomalies. So what I will do is I will start by beginning this setup. I will click on it. So the first step is that you select what all model categories or classes that you want to track. So let's say I want to go for, so these are like resource categories, and then you have this model categories. And then you can select, you can even pick and choose like what all servers that you want to go for. For now, I'm selecting bunch of these. And then I hit next. So the next step is that basis whatever scope that I selected, it is going to recommend what all discovery patterns or SGCs or service graph connectors that you can potentially use. Here you see the attribute coverage where, let's say for SCCM, it says that this is something pretty important for ham use case, the model data, because it will help you in normalization. So what all it captures. So then basis this information, you can make a call. If SCCM is capturing all these attributes, it's wise to configure it given that this technology exists in your organization. So essentially, it's a review step as of now, but as you finish this playbook, you should be able to configure all these recommendations. Okay. The next step is you can review CMDB settings that apply to ham, and you can see their current state. For example, these are a bunch of sync settings, creating asset on CI insertion, what's the current state. So this requires attention. So which means that whenever there is a change in the CI, you should be updating assets. So if this is not turned on, then there is a problem. And then you can review custom model categories that you have added. You can review field mappings, install status mappings, and so on. And you can also review if data manager policies are applied for the targeted classes. For example, in this case, I see that archival policies are all set for each of these classes, but no deletion policy has been set up for the given classes. So it's wise that you should be configuring these policies from governance standpoint. So as you finish this, we'll take you to this dashboard, which is ham-tailored CMDB dashboard to assess the health of hardware CI data, depending on whatever scope that you selected here. So let me try to refresh it just to populate the whole data. Okay, so this is what we have got. So you start by looking at the breakup of all the CI data set across whatever classes that you selected. And this data is for last 7 days. But this is the latest data that you see as on date, and this is a breakup by integration source. I will talk about all the rest of these metrics, but first I will touch upon the settings and data integrations, but because I briefly covered this in the playbook. So I talked about these settings where I said that few of these settings require attention. So in this case, first thing is that we have actually worked with experts who are who implement CMDB for ham implementation. So these are all settings that we shortlisted, and these directly apply to ham implementations. So you now need not go through all the documentation. So this is all what is recommended. And also in CMDB, you need not even find it where the setting is located. You can just go to the rule and you can just try to activate that rule as long as you have the required role to activate the same. For example, this is not activated, so I checked on activate and I just update this. So this is updated, and let's see, the change has been applied. Okay, let me see if this was saved properly. It was not saved. Yeah, so this is an ideal state now. And same way, there are a bunch of settings that you can go through. And same applies for policies that, you can create a policy then if it doesn't exist for the targeted classes for yourself. And then when it comes to data integration, so here are various connectors and discovery patterns that we are recommending. I talked about SCCM. So the good news is that the connector is already installed, but there is no active connection as such. So you can even create connection from here itself, where you go to the central, and then you can create a connection for SCCM by hitting on this create connection. You can choose SCCM, and you can get into the configuration steps for SCCM, right? I won't go into configuring this, but this is the whole idea about recommendations on SDCs. Now, let me come back to the dashboard, where I touched upon these two metrics, which are pretty informational metrics. It gives you breakups of CIs by model category and breakup of CIs by integration source. The next part is what all attributes matter for hardware CIs. For example, all this model data that you see, name, number, manufacturer, serial number, location, missing owner, all these are like handpicked for hardware CIs, which are very important. And then when you click on it, then you can actually slice and dice this data and get to see what class of CIs is missing most of this data. You can group by class, or you can even analyze, okay, from what discovery source are these CIs being captured without model name. Now, to get to the root cause, either that discovery source doesn't support that field itself, capturing that field, or there can be problem in the discovery in the import schedule itself. So root cause analysis is something then you can do by trying to group the CI data as per the class or the discovery source. And you can also look at these suggested resources on the guide to how to remediate these kind of problems. But in future, we are evaluating to put in various agents to trigger all this analysis on its own and help with the corresponding root cause analysis and the remediation process. But for now, we are essentially working on surfacing these anomalies. That's a starting point for us. And rest all are same, like attributes are missing in the CIs, and how you go about knowing, okay, what CIs are missing these kind of fields and how you want to fix it. The next one is CA data quality issues. This is a fundamental to any CMDB data, which is staleness, CI is not updated, and we are giving even a filter because it is pretty subjective that depending on the model category, you want to further analyze whether server was updated in last 90 days because you won't update that frequently. So 90 days will be good for you. And you can see the breakup of those CIs. And then when you click on it, you can further deep dive into a certain pie. And then you can review the corresponding policies for those CIs, for those classes, and try to limit those tail CIs. Duplicate CIs, you click here and you get to know about the duplicate CIs. And then we are bridging the gap with deduplication process here, where, let me group it by, class. I see most of the duplicate CIs corresponds to a computer class. So you click on deduplication. And here what you can do is you can actually filter by computer, and then you can assign to template and run deduplication for computer. Last one is pretty important. This is where we are discovering problems which are CI and asset related, where CIs are missing assets. Now the underlying problem can be that sync rule, or it can be assets are missing CI, or there can also be virtual CIs which are being created for virtual assets. So when I click on it, so there are 91 assets which are created for CIs, virtual CIs against which assets have been created. Now, how to fix that? So you go to view assets. Now, in order to tackle this situation, in case you don't want virtual assets to be added, so against that model, you can actually change the the asset tracking strategy to do not create assets, so that in future, these assets are not created for a certain model which you think is a virtual model. Okay, again, you can go end to end, and there's a video also how to tackle these virtual assets here. The last one here is mismatch between the install status and the asset state. So I will just zoom on in mismatch. For example, pending repair. So that means the CI install status says that it is pending repair, but the corresponding asset state is not something which is matching. It is, let's see what's the state of those hardware assets. So I see these assets were installed status as pending repair, but now let me group it by the state. So it says it's in use. So there is a problem in a pending repair and in use. Then now there can be problem in the process side itself, that the state is not properly by the IT person itself for that corresponding asset. Now, as you work on these anomalies and you try to fix that data, and let's say for a year, your focus is to improve the CMDB health of targeted model categories. And then in future, as you improve the health, you can try to add into your scope by checking in more model categories that you want to track. And then it is going to then recommend the corresponding integration sources and what's the implication of these settings on whatever new classes that you're adding. So that's how you can analyze from CMDB standpoint. So that's all I wanted to cover. And now let me get back to the presentation. So CMDB Success Advisor version 1.0 is now available in the store. And as I said, we are covering ham outcomes. So let me click on this. So this is the link that you need to use in case you're interested in using CMDB Success Advisor. So you can go to the store. So it's a limited availability product, which means that you have to request for the application and I will approve that. So you click on get, request will come to me, and then I will approve it. And then Ham Pro is required to use CMDB Success Advisor. And here is the compatible platform release. And if you have any questions on this product to onboard this product, or if you're already using this product, I will be really happy if you could reach out to me for any feedback that you have, how we can improve this product as we move towards GA potentially next year. Thank you, and over to Callan.
So I'm talking about data manager and stale data. So I'm going to share just a couple slides first, but I'm also going to talk about CMDB health in general. That really is. So I'm Callan Bond. Good to be with everybody here today. And yeah, as I said, we're going to be talking about data manager, which is used to manage stale data, which in my opinion is sort of one of the biggest health areas that our customers can struggle with. Not everybody, obviously, but it is a problem that a lot of customers do struggle with. And it's one of a number of metrics. So you've heard the number 40 metrics thrown around. That 40 metrics is roughly the number of metrics that we cover in the data foundations dashboards, which I'll also show briefly today. There's a couple of dashboards that many of you are using, but not all of you. So we certainly always take opportunities like this to do a quick demo and spread the gospel of, hey, here's a really good place within CMDB Workspace that you can go and learn how you are doing for your CMDB health and how you can use those dashboards to identify, again, potential problem areas and how to remediate them. One of those metrics, though, is stale data. And so let's talk briefly about stale data before we go in and just do some demo stuff. So stale data, we'll talk about what it is and then why it's important, but we'll start with the what. And so when we talk stale data, we're typically talking about, from a CMDB perspective, we're talking about hardware CIs and VM instance. That's so your virtual CIs. That's what we measure in our metric in the dashboards. And so when we report, you get a score. It's just looking at those CIs. It's not looking at generally logical CIs. So there's a lot of stuff in your CMDB that really won't get updated often, services, whatever, stuff like that. We don't measure that when we're talking stale data. We're measuring things that should be discovered in an automated cadence and that we want to dig into when they are not, when they're not being discovered, when they're not being updated. And so specifically, how do we measure that? Every CI in the CMDB has got a field called updated. And that updated field is updated to the current day and time whenever anything changes on that CI. So if you go in and manually update it, you put a comment on a CI, you update the number of CPU cores on a server, whatever, it will change that field that you update, and it also changes the updated date timestamp. The other way that it's updated is when discovery runs or a discovery tool runs. And so typically those are running nightly. You might have them run every couple of days or weekly, but most folks have those running nightly. And so, for example, when discovery runs and it finds a bunch of servers in a data center, those servers will get updated in your CMDB. So it'll connect back to the ServiceNow platform. It'll use the identification and reconciliation engine, the IRE, to take the server that it's found, match it to the server that's already in your CMDB. And if something has changed, again, say the OS version has changed or whatever, it'll update that server that's in your CMDB. Even if nothing has changed, though, it will update a field called last discovered, which says, hey, I found this server Tuesday night at 2:15 a.m. That field will get updated. And because that field was updated, the updated field is also updated. So that updated field is the field that we look at to see, hey, is this server being discovered? Is it in use? Is it operational? And so if it's not, you can set a threshold to say if this updated field hasn't been hit for 60 days or 90 days, we're going to say that that data is stale and we need to do something about it. And typically there's two reasons why a server or some CI would go stale. And that's the two buckets that we have down below there. One is it is actually out there in your network, it's operational, but discovery for one reason or the other is not finding and reporting it back. So it may be that credentials have expired that discovery needs to access that server. It could be that this discovery schedule is completely broken and a whole swath of stuff is not getting discovered, whatever. So in that case, the server's out there, it's just not being found. In another case, the server maybe was never out there or the server has been retired. So it's still in your CMDB. It still says it's operational. And that's one other criteria that I'll show when we go in Data Manager and set up these policies. We do tend to want to focus on CIs, configuration items that say they're operational. So it says it's operational in your CMDB, but it really isn't in your environment. And that is a big problem for customers if they have, and some customers have a lot of stale data. So they may have had old data loads, some discovery system populate the CMDB at some point in time incorrectly, and there are hundreds, thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of stale records. And that is not good because when you're doing reports out of your CMDB, anything that you're using that information for, you're selecting the CIs on incidents or changes. And this is covered in part on the next slide here. You can be selecting this stale data, and it really can erode trust in your CMDB, and it can just negatively impact any kind of benefits you're looking to get out of your CMDB. And so we've had customers where they've been asked, okay, give me a list of all servers that are in a specific data center. And they produce a list. They say, yeah, here we go. This is out of our CMDB. And there is all kinds of incorrect data in there. And that is can become a big problem. So we want to clean that up with Data Manager. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go into a demo. And I see a question here. We'll go into questions at the end here. Let me go into Chrome. Okay, this is just refreshing. Great. Okay, everybody, again, you can see my demo instance here. I'm assuming you can just say no if not. Otherwise, I will continue. Yeah, okay, thanks, Tony. Okay, so before we get into Data Manager, I do want to just spend a couple minutes and talk about where you can go to get a better idea of health. So when we talk about CMDB health, there's actually a couple places within CMDB Workspace. So hopefully everybody on the call.
Callan, we are not able to see it properly.
Oh,
It's
you're
just...
not? Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah, let me try this. Sorry.
Yes, now it is.
Okay, thanks, Vern. Thank you. Okay, so you come into CMD Workspace. Hopefully everybody is familiar with CMD Workspace. It'll be under your workspaces. And when we talk about health, there's a couple of things that we can look at. One is the CMDB Health Dashboard. This has been around forever. For many people, when they think of CMDB Health, it's completeness, compliance, and correctness. They think of these three metrics. I'm not going to go into those today. This dashboard, that CMDB Health Dashboard, is good to provide a really focused view of what you want to look at in your within your instance, but it's not a sort of ServiceNow prescriptive. This is everything we think of as a requirement for a healthy CMDB. But it is good to really focus in if you're like, we just care about Linux servers or we care about certain discovery sources of data and we want to see how those CIs are doing. This CMDB Health Dashboard is great. For the ServiceNow prescriptive, what does ServiceNow think of in terms of a healthy CMDB? That is the data foundation dashboards. And so you can get to them through navigation here. You can just type data foundation. I have it bookmarks. I love them, but otherwise you can get to them there. Also from within Workspace, you can go to management and then they're linked on the side here. So I'll just show you the data foundation one here. And so again, when we're talking about the 40 metrics, so this is a broad spectrum of metrics that make up a healthy CMDB. And what Varun is sort of building on with that is the success advisors, which will take a subset of metrics from here, plus some other metrics that are not in here that really support a particular vertical product outcome like HAM or the ones that they're building out in the future, whatever those may be, and whenever they come to bear, but they're in the pipeline for sure. So in the data foundations dashboard, we can see some metrics here. There's 4 tabs here, and so each tab has a different set of metrics on it. The metrics all have a score, and so that's your main thing that you look at here is the result. Score is always between 0 and 100. 0 is bad and 100 is good. So if everything's 100, you're good. And there's a priority. And so the priority is dynamic. It's not just that these things are always low, and if I go here, that services with owners is always high. The priority is actually made based on two things. It's set based on two things. One is the result. So if the result is low, it drives up the priority because, hey, your services with owner score is bad. You should probably look at that. That's why the priority becomes high, and it actually dynamically shifts the order of the metrics here so that the highs come up top. There is also another weighting that is hidden. We initially had it in these dashboards and we hid it because it was a little confusing. Not all of these metrics are created equal. Some are more important than others. And so there's a weighting behind the scenes. So this priority is based on the weighting of the metric and the result. So if I think my demo data changed here. Yeah, but if we look at active CIs updated in 90 days and servers with location, even if this was 0%, this would be low, maybe medium. And that is because the weighting on these is different. So this one is stale data and it's weighted high. So it's very important to look at if your score is low. The other two things I'll just touch on with these dashboards are the widgets down below. So if you see all of these metrics, these are sort of phrased positively, like, okay, your active CI is updated in the last 90 days. That's what you want. 100 would be great. 0 is bad. But then you can see more details down below. So if I look at this one, I can click in. I can see the actual number. I can see a little histogram, how things have gone. And then for most of the metrics, not all of them though, you can see the details. So you can see the individual CIs that in this case, that would be stale. So I can click this little clock to turn real-time scores on, and then I can click show records and it'll show the records. So this lets you do a little more digging on, okay, I've got 3,100 stale records. Here they are. And I can do some group bys. Maybe I can group by class. I might look at discovery source. I can add columns here and do some, I've already got discovery source here, and just do some digging that way to try and find out maybe a root cause of why some are stale. So if I come in here and I see a bunch are a discovery source is ServiceNow Discovery, then that might lead me back to, oh, these were initially populated by Discovery, but they're not being updated now. Why is that? Maybe I reach out to my counterpart who owns Discovery and we do some digging. So it's a really good tool to just dig in to why a metric is the way it is. The last thing I'll share off these dashboards are the KB articles here. So these were created by a lot of really smart experts who work with customers all the time here. So we have a team called a Ranger team, them and in conjunction with expert services. So there's a KB playbook for every one of these metrics, and it gives you a good overview. I'm not going to read what's in here, but just it tells you why is the metric, like what is the problem that we're looking at with this metric? What are some upstream causes? So what are some common, what am I in here? I'm in the stale CIs one. So some common upstream causes. Yeah, maybe there's problems with discovery. So just general set the stage on what typically goes wrong. And this is again from folks who work with customers all the time and sort of have this built-in knowledge. They've captured it in these KB articles. Why is that a problem? What are your downstream consequences and how does that impact our operations or applications? Some questions to think about, and then some plays. And so some of these remediation plays are analysis plays where they just walk you through getting more information. And some of them, they just say, go into the Data Foundation dashboards and look at the widgets in there. Little pictures aren't loading today for some reason, but they'll have screenshots in here. And then they have some steps that you can go through. And these are guidance. Not every customer's environment is the same. Not everybody's instance is the same. But these definitely can help put you down the path to doing this troubleshooting and remediating these issues yourself. So these KB articles are fantastic. There's one for every metric that are in the data foundation and the CSDM data foundation dashboards. So there's a set of dashboards all about CSDM as well. So these are really great. If you haven't seen or used these yet, I really encourage you to do so. We have when Jamie talked about governance. So if you have a regular group that meets, a configuration control board or some sort of group that meets, or not, if it's just you or one of your coworkers who's sort of the person at your company that really cares about the CMDB, these are something to definitely look at on a regular basis. So you want to do it weekly, maybe with some of your peers monthly. A lot of these metrics certainly extend beyond just purely at CMDB in terms of people who would care about them. If it's ones, again, like staleness that have to do with discovery, your discovery team would want to be plugged into that. There's ITSM ones, there's all kind of ones that have to do with the CMDB, but they reach beyond just pure CMDB. So great, great resource. But as I mentioned, one of the main metrics in here that, in my mind, if there was one metric I could snap my fingers and fix for everybody, it would be staleness. There's a lot of the other metrics you'll see will improve if you fix staleness. You may have CIs without names or without serial numbers. Those are all things that we measure and say that are important to keep right. But a lot of those are tied often to stale CIs. So if you clean those stale CIs out, you're fixing the other stuff as well. So Data Manager you can get to from the CMDB Workspace main page. It's Data Manager here. Also, as we were on the Management tab, it's also linked on here. So we'll go in here. And so what Data Manager is going to do is look at stale data and retire it and then get it out of your CMDB. So it's a two-step process. To get data out of your CMDB, there's one of two ways you can do it. You can either archive it or you can delete it. And Data Manager will do that for you. It will archive or delete data that you tell it to archive or delete. But it has to be retired first. You cannot just simply archive or delete data using Data Manager. You retire it first, and then it's down one of two paths, archive or delete. And in most cases, customers are archiving data. If it's servers or something like that, they will archive it. But for certain classes or certain data that customers know it was loaded erroneously, we just want to get rid of it, you may just delete that data. But first we want to retire it. And so we're going to tell Data Manager, we're going to set a query filter and say, hey, go through and retire all of these CIs. And as a sort of a one-time setup, we want to tell Data Manager, hey, when you go retire something, what does that actually mean? When you retire something, what do you do to retire a CI? And that's where we set the retirement definitions. So you do this first if you haven't already done this with Data Manager. You go into Manage Retirement Definitions. And when we talk about retiring something, we're really talking about managing the life cycle of it. And so kind of unfortunately today on CIs in the CMDB, there are a lot of different fields that have to do with managing the life cycle of a record of an individual CI. And so in the retirement definitions page that we're on here, we're saying all of these different fields, set them to these different values. And then when Data Manager runs and finds CIs to retire, it will set these fields that we've denoted here to the values that we've denoted here. And so out of box, I don't know now if some of these are set true or false out of box, but regardless, when you go in and set these up, you can look at the different stages of the hierarchy, and then you can set them to be, you want them at least one to be true. And so if we look at CMDB CI, this is sort of the top of the hierarchy in the CMDB. Lifecycle stage and lifecycle stage status are not new at this point. They've been around for a few years, but they're still relatively new compared to all the other lifecycle fields that are still around on CIs. And so we say, okay, if we're retiring something, we want to set lifecycle stage to be end of life, and then stage status, which is sort of a subset of values dependent on what lifecycle stage is set to be retired. So anything we retire, if it's in the CMDB, and Data Manager really works mainly on the CMDB, is we're going to set these fields when we retire something. The other thing we're going to do is if it's hardware, there's some more fields that we want to set. Operational status is a field that Discovery sets when it finds something. It will set it to operational. Can set it in certain circumstances, depending how you have it configured to retire stuff. But Discovery really works best at just finding stuff and saying, hey, I found it, it's operational. We use Data Manager to retire it. And so we set the operational status as well. We'd like to just have these two, lifecycle stage and lifecycle stage status. But for example, for discovery, all of the discovery schedules would have to be updated. All of our customers have. That won't happen. So operational status as another way to track lifecycle of a CI will be around probably forever. And so we set it to retired here. Install status is a status that's used to keep CIs and asset records in sync. So if you have an asset record that is not in a CMDB, it's a separate record looking at the same thing that the CMDB CI record is looking at, the same Windows server. It has its own state and substate fields, and we keep those life cycles in sync on the CI side through install status. Hardware status is an older field. Some customers still use it, who've been around for a long time. Newer customers really would not use this field, but there's no sort of harm in just setting it to retired for fields, so we just include it here as well. So there's more in here. You can go and sort of configure this to what makes sense for your instance, but this is generally a one-time setup that you want to go in and look at before you start doing the real meat and potatoes of Data Manager, which is setting up policies. All right, so let's go back to the overview here. You can see a bunch of widgets in here, generally around tasks. And so when Data Manager runs, it creates a bunch of tasks, and that's a way the tasks are twofold. If you are going to have approvals for when you retire stuff, if it's going to go to groups, and we'll see how that works when you set up the policy. The tasks are the ones that obviously go via the workflow, but it's also a logging method. So you can go and look at the tasks afterwards and see everything that Data Manager has been doing. So we create policies, which are just essentially scheduled jobs that run at night to go and actually retire and then archive or delete stuff. So I'm going to make one here. So let's say we're going to make a policy to retire Windows servers. So I'll say Windows Server test, retire. We pick the policy type. So we've got, if I did archive or delete first and nothing was retired, they wouldn't do anything. So we're going to pick retire first. I'll just quickly talk on attestation and certification. So these are other things, not really to do with managing lifecycle directly, but that Data Manager can handle for you. So attestation, if you have a requirement for somebody to attest, and many customers do, that you have a bunch of servers. Yes, we have these servers, they physically exist in our environment, and somebody has to attest to that fact. You can use attestation to do that. Go find a bunch of servers that you select in a query, and then send that to a person that you denote, and that person can then go through and attest to the fact that those servers exist and are actively used. Certification is similar. It's a little more detailed. So you can say, for example, we have a policy in our environment that every Windows server has a specific OS version on it or has a certain CPU count. So when you certify, you can set up a policy to say, go find Windows servers, and then look at these values of these attributes, everything that you denote in there. Again, that could go to somebody to look at that list and then certify, yep, that is correct. Or no, these ones don't meet that criteria. We have to go look at them. But for today, we're looking at retire, archive, and delete. So we obviously start with a retire policy. Click continue. We set the class that we're going to look at. So we're doing Windows servers. I pick that. You can set the class down here. You could just say configuration item, put class equals whatever down here. It just gives you a slightly different way to approach it. And we said, okay, there's two things we want to say if a Windows server in our CMDB is stale. The first is that it's operational. So if the operational status is like it's already retired or it's in maintenance or something like that, we don't care about that so much. We really want to find ones that say they're operational, but they're not around. So we're going to look for ones that are operational. And then more importantly, we're going to look for ones that haven't been found for 60 days. So I do updated. That's that field we talked about. At or before last 60 days. Okay, so I can apply these filters. Data manager is going to run and say, hey, I found 374 Windows servers that meet that criteria. They're operational and they haven't been updated for more than 60 days. So I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't know I had that many stale Windows servers. I mean, I did in this environment because it's a bunch of garbage data, but you may find something you weren't thinking was going to be there. Next, if we're going to, we sort of have to pick here who the task would get assigned to. At the next step, you actually set whether they're going to have to do approval or not. But on that task, you can either pick a field that is on the CI. So like on the CIs, there's the group. So if I pick, for example, user group field, and you can see there's approval group, change group. So hopefully your CIs have like support groups populated. Then if this was going to get sent for approval, it would go to whoever you pick here. Alternatively, you could just denote a specific name. You could say everything goes to Bob. Bob's the guy. He's going to have to look at this. Then if your support group doesn't have something populated, so you may have some CIs that have support group populated, some that don't, you can tell Data Manager what to do with the task here. So if support group is not populated, you could just say, okay, we'll just make an unassigned task. Somebody will go in and clean that up. Or this, you could have a backup. You could say, all right, if support group is not populated, if the task assignment field is empty, meaning this field is empty, then go in and assign it to some other group. So just whatever, pick this group. Then here, I got to log a thing with Tony. There's always a drop down with one choice here, which I don't quite understand, but you'll just pick retire. And then here's where you pick whether you want it to actually require review or not. I'd say most customers don't. Maybe if you're doing, and you would also do this in subprod first, but you certainly can, depends on your company, whether you have this go to somebody, and it'll create those tasks and send to them. I'm just going to leave it blank. Continue here. This is kind of an FYI page that just tells you, hey, this isn't going to happen right now. There's a nightly job. You can go into scheduled jobs and just look for, I think, CMDB retire, put some wildcards around that. It'll pop up. You can click execute now and it would run it right then. Otherwise, it's just going to run it whenever it's scheduled to run, which is sometime overnight. And then a final step. So here we've got 374 records, one task. A task can hold up to 10,000 records. So if you're worried like, okay, this is going to go to somebody to approve, they don't approve one at a time. It'll have one task with up to 10,000 CIs in there that they can scroll through that and then just say approve. So if I had 11,000 records that were going to be retired, then it would have two tasks. So that's it. I'm not going to publish because I don't want all my demo data to get retired. So that is retire. And I'm going to quickly show you archive, and then we'll have a few minutes to go into questions. So let's go back to Data Manager. Now, if we had that retire policy running, then once those records are, I'll leave it with the R there. Once those records are retired, then we can archive them. And that policy, that retire policy and the archive policy that I'm going to make here, if those were published, those run every night. And so those 374 Windows servers, when that runs tonight, it's going to find those. It's going to set all of those fields that we put in the retirement definitions, the one-time setup. It's going to set all those to retired. And then it'll be done, but it'll run the next night. And so when it runs the next night, it's not going to find those same Windows servers for two reasons. So one reason is they are no longer operational because they have all of those fields have been set to like end of life and retired, all that stuff that we set. When the policy executed and it set all of those fields, the other thing it did was set the updated date. Remember, we talked about the updated date gets updated whenever anything is changed. That includes those lifecycle fields. So the updated date would have been basically Tuesday, so it would have been Tuesday night, 2 a.m. That record was updated. And so when the retirement policy runs again, it would search And those Windows servers would not meet both criteria. They're not operational and they're not stale anymore. They've been updated within the last 60 days. But if there were other Windows servers that maybe were 58 days old, then 59, and then 60, as they sort of age out, that policy is running every night, so it will catch them up. So it just keeps your CMDB nice and clean, in perpetuity. The archive one is what we do to actually get stuff out of your CMDB. So we do this. It's very similar. We set the class that we want to do, and you could set, and many customers do, higher in the CMDB hierarchy. So you might do all computer, you might do all hardware, and then you can set down below here. You could set I just want, and this would be for when you're doing the retire policy, probably more so than the archive policy. Maybe I want to do ones from a certain discovery source, so you might want to break your policies around that way. So there was a bug, I believe it's been fixed, but I'll say it just in case because I haven't checked. There was a bug where if you had no conditions here, the policy would not run, and you always need one condition. And you might think, okay, well, we want to archive stuff that's retired, so I want to check these Windows servers to see if they're retired. And actually, you don't have to put that condition in here. It's hard coded in. I will put some conditions here, and then it's going to add on, and all of these lifecycle fields are set to retired. So you cannot archive stuff that isn't already retired. But one thing that some customers do is they say, I want a period between retiring something and archiving something. So if I retire it, still in the CMDB, it's just setting a bunch of lifecycle fields to retire. I can undo that pretty easily. Once you archive, it's out of the CMDB, it's into an archive table. So a couple things about it moving into the archive table. Number one, you can restore it. You can go into that individual archive record and you can click restore record. And where it puts it is if the table does not already exist, it makes a table that's identical to the CMDB table. It just prefixes it with AR underscore. So for Windows servers, it's going to take servers out of CMDB underscore CI underscore win underscore server, and it's going to put them in AR underscore CMDB CI win server. So you could go into that table, you could pull up in your record and click restore, and it'll just put it all back. The other thing that's good about archive and good to know is that when it moves into an archive table, all of the links to that archive record get repointed to the archive record. So if you had a Windows server, say you had Windows Server 1234556 was the specific server, it had a bunch of incidents and changes and other stuff that pointed to that CI record. When that Windows Server 1234556 goes into the archive table, the archive process actually scans through every table that could potentially point to that CI and it updates the link. So it's a really nice feature that it doesn't break all of your context once something is archived. So in here, though, we don't have to put in a condition to check that it's retired, but we could say, let's give it a week. Let's retire something. Once it's retired, let's wait. And then in a week later, let's archive it. So same thing, you could look at the updated field. You could say at or before. And in this case, you might just say 7 days. So because when it was retired, the updated was changed to current date and time. A week later, it's now going to be we're going to be sort of more comfortable. Maybe somebody did a last check, whatever. And now we want to archive it. So right now, I don't have any records that meet that criteria. But if my retire policy was running, a week later, this thing would pick them all up. And then here's the enforced conditions. So you can see operational status retired, install status retired, so on and so forth. Pick a group. Let's just pick good old Able Tutor. He's going to be the guy. Subflow archive, needs review or not. Retention time. So when something is archived, eventually it's going to be deleted. You'd want to check with your data retention folks. A lot of customers, like Sarbanes-Oxley, is 7 years. Typically, a lot of people put 7 years. Don't take my word for that. Check with your data retention teams. Don't set this yourself if you're not sure, but don't leave it at the default of a day either. Because once it's deleted, it's out. And so when I said you have archive or delete, if you delete something, it's gone. You cannot recover it. You could call support. They're going to say, sorry, once it's deleted, it is gone. Same thing, this policy is going to run every night. And then right now it's not finding any. If my other policy were running, then in a week, those 373 records would all be retired. They would all have not been updated for a week. Then this policy would pick them up and it would archive them. Then at that point, they're out of your CMDB. They're not going to show up on any reports. They're not, if you have tens or hundreds of thousands, it can start to affect performance of your CMDB reporting. But really, most importantly, you're not going to have reports come out that say we've got a bunch of stuff at a location or stuff assigned to somebody that does not exist. That is what you want. You want to build that trust back in your CMDB, and that's really what Data Manager gives you for managing your stale data. Okay, that's the end of my spiel on Data Manager. I don't know the other folks, other ServiceNow folks on the call as well can certainly come off mute. And do we have any, I don't know if you guys have been answering QA as we've been going. Do we have any sort of questions either for Varun or myself or Jamie?
Yeah, thank you, Callan. Awesome. All right. So we are approaching towards the end of the session. I really appreciate everybody's time and joining us on the webinar today. We would love to hear your feedback. There'll be a post-session survey that will be launched after the webinar. So please take time to complete it so that we can engage better in future with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We will also share the session recording and the slides with you within a week's time. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of the day. Lovely connecting with you.